Okay, so we're going to start with the 60 grit in my vibrating sander. I've chucked it into a vise here. This is normally what I do when I start doing some pretty heavy shaping. If I had a belt sander, that's what I'd be using, but this seems to work for me in my shop for right now. And we're using the 60 grit because I got to take away a lot of material. I'm adding a full bevel to this blade, and it's just a lot easier to do it with the belt sander than it is by hand. And that's really because the laser cutter only cuts in 2 dimensions, so I can't add it in the machine, so I've got to add it in post here. And then we go ahead and swap everything out for the 150 grit, and this is much better sandpaper. As you'll see, it holds up really well. This is the Sandblaster paper from 3M, and I just love this stuff. And now I'm just trying to get that final cut to that edge, and that's really easy to see in the laser cutter because when we cut it, it actually burns the material. So I have a black line that goes all the way around. And as I'm bringing the material down, I just try to get that to where it disappears or comes to a really fine, thin line. And that helps to know that, you know, I've got both sides about beveled the same and everything's looking good. And we're going to go ahead and switch parts here. This is going to be the top and bottom of the blade detail, and right now I'm just trying to take some of that material off. I want this to be not a uniform thickness. I want it to taper down towards the end. It just adds more to the part because it's several different sizes of material, and so that removes that illusion, so it doesn't look like 2 pieces of material have just been like stuck together. It looks like they were actually created. So we'll do this with both of these and get it to where it'll look right for us. And finally, we're going to be sanding down the top of the crossguard, and I want to take quite a bit of material off on this as well because it's a 6mm piece, and I want it to bevel in pretty sharp as it sort of does in the part. If you're looking at the reference images, and this is just kind of a tedious thing, but we have to kind of get that look, and we'll do a little bit of hand sanding after this. But this is just to get everything really roughed in to where we want it before we start assembling everything and gluing it all together. Alright, so now we're going to start the gluing process. This is going to be pretty simple. We're going to use just regular wood glue here. The wood glue is great for MDF. It tends to soak everything up pretty good and attach, provides a really good contact, especially if you clamp it all together. And we're going to be layering these parts on top of each other. And if you'll notice, I've cut them at different places in each part so that, yes, I have to cut it because it doesn't fit in my laser, but in order to compensate for that, I'm making everything a different size or a different cut in a different place so that there's not one point of failure. They're supporting each other. And the final part of the crossguard, the thicker 6mm pieces that go on top and bottom, that'll help us to not have that issue to help hold that whole thing together. And that'll be the structure that keeps that whole unit together. Just adding that last piece here before we start adding the top layer. So now once we get these 2 top layers on, this will kind of unite the whole piece together and hold it all together, and then we're going to clamp that together and really let it dry and cure so that I don't have to worry about it breaking at all. So we're going to go ahead and add or clamp it all together, and using this type of clamp was a problem. Every time I twisted it, it would move all the parts. So one of the other kind that has the grip on it that just applies lateral pressure instead of twisting to get tighter would be better in this case. But I just twist it a little bit and adjust the pieces and get them right where I want it, but also tight enough that once everything glues together, it's going to be basically one solid piece of MDF at this point. We're also going to add a little clamp to the top there to hold that piece down and make sure it glues flat, because we have chamfered that or tapered that so that it fits up there. And we did a little bit of sanding on this small piece because it needed to be beveled, but it just didn't work. It wasn't good, so we kind of abandoned it, and I went back in and hand did them later, which is why they're really not in this assembly video. And so now we're just going to start working on that grip for the crossguard, and this is just to take all that material and make it all look like one cohesive piece of material. You know, there's small variations in the pieces, and so you have to get rid of the layers. And we will add a little bit of fill to this later to help out, but for right now it's just getting it roughed in to where the majority of that is all kind of this smoothed out, to all the high points are smoothed out, and then there are a couple low points that we have to fill in. But this really helps that to give it the illusion that it's not several layers of pieces, it's one whole unit. So now we're back to the workbench and trying to assemble this thing, and the issue we had here was that the material thickness is sometimes varies. I mean, it can vary from one side of the sheet to the other. It doesn't vary much, but in a case like this where we're trying to get two pieces to connect that are fairly tight tolerance, it's needed to be sanded a little bit here and there, and it's just a little bit of a pain to get everything worked in. But once we get it, worked out, we can attach all these pieces together and create that interior assembly for the grip that will then be putting the styrene and other stuff on. So we're going to start with the pommel now, and the pommel initially was going to be wrapped in these two, in this styrene, but it just wasn't a good idea. I realized it was really close to just being 3 layers, so I went ahead and cut a new piece, and we'll just glue those 3 together. So now we've got our third piece, and we're going to go ahead and glue the whole thing together and get that onto the end of the pommel and get it glued down so that we can finish adding the other elements. We'll be sanding this down later so that it's more, again, looks like the one layer, but also this piece could be tapered a little bit, so tapering it a little bit, adds to the look of the part. Alright, so now we're going to add that base piece. And then there'll be one more piece on top of that that'll cover up the end of the grip and make everything look like it's, again, one piece of material. So now we got our grip together, our pommel together. We're going to go ahead and start working on the grip. And this styrene wrap is put down using super glue. And super glue seems to be the best that I've found for putting the styrene on the super glue. This is 2O styrene, so it's fairly thin. And I'm going to use a method I've kind of developed over the years to roll these pieces together that works really well, and that's to roll this to add the glue, and then I'm going to roll it on the edge of the table. So move the camera here and get the piece attached. And by rolling it, you can keep a constant pressure and a constant tension on the part so that it stays against the material, but also allows you to get a solid connection, but also a tight connection, because you need that in order for it to fit the part the way it's supposed to. Again, using the zip kicker to get it to glue the super glue faster. So now we're going to add the other half, and this is sort of tricky, and you'll notice that there's a gap here, and that's something I really haven't been able to work out yet. I usually modify the files, but for something like this that we're only doing once, it takes cutting that part 2 or 3 times to size it right. So if I was making a kit, I would work it out. But for now, I'm just going to fill that, and I'll do that here in a minute. But the grip is now, it has that styrene piece on it, so it's looking the way we want it, and it's looking pretty good. We're also going to be adding these other styrene pieces. These are all our decorative pieces. These are adding extra dimensions to the part. And that allows us to add them finer details. Like normally, if these were inlaid, I would etch them into the material, but because they're more substantial in the reference images, we're adding an extra layer on top. And as you can see, we added a bunch more. Now we're going to start working on the lower part, and the styrene bits are, you know, just super glue to super glue works really good for them. I really haven't had a problem with them coming up too much. We're adding, you know, a little bit more detail down here on the pommel, and those, you know, that styrene again works really well for shapes that are not flat. Like this is curved and it's beveled, so the styrene is flexible enough just to kind of lay in a groove where we want it. So now we're going to go ahead and start cutting a piece. We're going to add a little bit of filler, and I use a little bit of a thicker super glue, a gap filling super glue here. That's what I normally use anyway, and that'll mean if I go ahead and sand this down, it'll look good. And so the piece is just there to kind of add a bunch of material, and we're going to sand it to get it down to that, to nice and smooth, and make that joint kind of disappear. Well, this is pretty much where we're going to wrap this video. The blade is pretty much assembled. There are a couple pieces missing, and I am going to do those a little bit, and then we'll get on to sanding and painting it in the next video and show you how we do all that. But this is pretty much the method we use for most of our MDF builds using the laser cutter. Thank you all for watching. This is our Dwarven Dagger from Skyrim. This is how we assembled it, put everything together. In the next video, we're going to talk about how we painted it and got it ready for all of that stuff, made it look so super awesome and metallic. And we'll be publishing that video about a week or so from now, so watch out for that. If you want to click on that little bubble over there, you can enter to win this dagger, and we're giving it away in about a week and a half or so, so go ahead and check that out. And once you've entered to win, you also get a chance to download the blueprint for this project, and we're going to give that away for free to everybody who watches the videos. And don't forget to subscribe on YouTube, and if you want, check out our Patreon, and that's where we're going to be giving away blueprints every month. And we use Patreon to kind of try and offset some of the costs of doing this and creating this kind of content, because this takes a lot of extra time that we could be dedicating to other stuff. And as a thank you to you guys, we go ahead and give away a blueprint every month. So thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next week.